Ladies and gentlemen, we need answers. That is why I say that the budget lacks credibility, and so they should come again.
Then you wonder what will be the benefit of the 24-hour economy. Compares favorably with the NDC's debt to GDP of 73% in 2016 when they left government.
Our brief or our update or our constructive criticisms on the budget. We also have the former Minister of State. We have former Minister of Works and Housing, former Minister of Education, and honorable members of Parliament, former Deputy Minister, here just to deliver on this press conference. We are just ready to roll. So please let us know if you are also ready so that we can. But before I do that, let me also take this opportunity to correct the impression that Oman and Netu were not invited. Apparently, they have not been within the parliamentary press corps for about 3-4 years. And this was actually directed by the dean of the parliamentary press corps. So please, let's have that information. And moving forward, we know how to do our politics. Okay, so we are ready.
So, honorable leaders of the caucus, honorable colleagues of the caucus, the minority caucus, as we call it, the mighty minority.
Yeah.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the media, on Tuesday, when the Minister for Finance presented the budget, we organized a press conference to express our preliminary comments on the budget. But we also indicated that we were going to have a press conference to present our position on the budget. And so we are happy that God has brought us here today for us to hold this press conference to enable us deliver our critique, our reaction to the 2025 budget as presented by the Minister of Finance. There are going to be 4 speakers. I will be starting as ranking member on the Finance Committee, and I'll be a bit technical. Then the Honorable Abuna Ose Asari will follow after me. She is the chair of the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, and she will be followed by Honorable Dr. Gideon Baku, who is a member of the Finance Committee, and then Honorable Kojo Okon Nkrumah will end it all. He is ranking on the Economy and Development Committee of Parliament. So all 4 of us will be addressing different aspects of our reaction to the 2025 budget. And so with these preliminary statements, I want to thank you very much, members of the media fraternity, for your support in disseminating our message to the Ghanaian people. You continue to be our great partners in our quest to deepen our democratic dispensation. And we are very hopeful that we will continue to travel this journey with you. You will recall that days before the budget presentation to Parliament by the Honorable Minister for Finance, Honorable Kesel Atiforsin, who did the presentation on behalf of His Excellency, the President, President Mahama, we hinted at clandestine plans by the government to manipulate fiscal data to support their baseless claims of inheriting a badly managed economy from the previous NPP government. This carefully crafted strategy has been pursued right from the president himself during his message on the state of the nation and repeated at the National Economic Dialogue. The 2025 budget was, however, going to be the vehicle for confirming what has been perfectly rehearsed to crown the narrative by putting data to the unfounded claims. We have been vindicated. Our intelligence has been confirmed, and the minister has done the hatchet job. The government, through the 2025 budget statement, churned out fiscal deficit on commitment basis of 7.6% of GDP and a primary deficit of 3.6% of GDP. This would imply, if you look at them on their face value, that the NPP administration mismanaged the fiscals in accord with the intentions of the NDC government. In fact, an economy with such strong revenue performance and expenditure controls, as we have seen from the data the minister presented, cannot produce the kind of elevated fiscal outcomes the minister announced. We see a lot of contradictions there. And this, we are very confident, will be exposed. But colleagues, this is where it gets interesting. They have erroneously churned out this wrong data in a bid to tarnish the image of the NPP administration by including 49.2 billion Ghana cedis in expenditure claims without any basis. Before the start of the IMF program in 2023, we had agreed with the IMF to set the fiscal anchor based on which we will monitor the IMF program. And these were the fiscal balances on commitment basis, primary balance, and overall fiscal balance. It was in a bid to have a real-time view on arrears accumulation. So we ring-fenced commitments that had gone through the gift mix system then and were awaiting payment. These commitments were termed outstanding expenditure claims. Thus, if you look at the 2022 budget outturn, you will see this concept in there. Per the IMF program, we then agreed to monitor the evolution of these claims vis-a-vis their net build-up. The reason for this approach is that Ghana is a developing nation with developmental needs. And so it was going to be unrealistic in the context of the program to not have new commitments. But the plan was to ensure that on net terms, the build-up remained almost neutral to avoid a significant build-up in arrears, which also hurts the economy. Also, it is important to note that if we look at the arrears clearance strategy prepared by the Ministry of Finance and submitted to the IMF in 2023 in fulfillment of the end September 2023 structural benchmark, the amount in expenditure claims, which we describe as arrears, was 47.5 billion Ghana cedis. This amount, after an aging profile analysis, had payments outstanding right from around 2012, 2013. So while we do not doubt the possibility of accumulating some arrears between end 2022 and end 2024, given our own peculiar liquidity constraints, including outstanding expenditure claims gathered from MDAs, we are very surprised that this was done without first undertaking the correct verification or audit of the numbers, which the minister himself alluded to in his speech, paragraph 135, under 2025 expenditure measures, as something he now intends to do. Therefore, just lifting a certain stock of expenditure claims of 49.2 billion Ghana cedis and inserting it into the fiscal frame to create an impression as though all those claims were generated in 2024. It's not just including expenditures that are alien to the fiscal framework, but also shows a clear lack of understanding of the mechanics of the fiscal framework. But this is very surprising to us that the minister could do that, because we expected him to know. And if he doesn't know, we expected him to be advised by the technical people at the Ministry of Finance. We must also note that our fiscal framework focuses on central government operations. Therefore, claims which have not been properly audited can introduce many elements of general government, which is what we think has happened. A classic example is the Controller and Accountant General's final accounts, which is one of the sources of information for the fiscal framework, but it's based on general government accounting. So if you take the information from it on the face value and plug it into the fiscal framework, you will be reporting on two very distinct items. And so what we usually do at the Ministry of Finance is to work through the numbers and pick the central government expenditures only. This can only be done, ladies and gentlemen, through verification and auditing. It is therefore curious how the finance minister will come to parliament with a budget and say that the fiscal deficit and primary deficit on commitment, which he announced, were derived using a certain data on claims, which he is yet to audit. Yet, he has announced results derived from the data to the effect that the economy was badly managed. It is too elementary to know that when you have not audited your figures, you cannot use them for an important work like the national budget. Otherwise, you create credibility problems for the conclusions of the budget, as the Honorable Atufosin has just done. And so you put 49.2 billion Ghana cedis in the fiscal framework to arrive at higher fiscal deficit. And then in the same budget, you say that you are yet to audit the 49.2 billion Ghana cedis. So on what basis did you validate the 49.2 billion Ghana cedis before putting it in the data, which threw the fiscal deficit away? And you come and announce to the Ghanaian public that the government mismanaged the fiscals of the country. This is Azar, this is Sakawa. The technical people at the Ministry of Finance are professionals. And I don't know if the Honorable Atu refused their advice. What I do know is that we've gone through 3 successful IMF reviews, and the technical people never told us that we needed to compile claims from several years and include it in the fiscal framework as if they were accumulated in 2024 alone. We were never told that. 3 reviews. Why they will do that in the last review, the 4th review, that is going to happen, we don't understand. And this is why even the IMF has to speak to this, because you cannot have inconsistent methodologies in assessing program implementation. You did the first review, the second review, the third review. You didn't bring arrears from multi-years into the fiscal framework. You use only arrears accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year, the very fiscal year you are assessing. 3 of them, you didn't do that. Then in the 4th one, you ask ministries and agencies and departments that they should just write what projects have they done which have not been paid. And they brought you those projects and you compiled it, amounted to 49 billion, and you say these are claims that must go into the fiscal data. Unfortunately, what the Honorable Minister failed to do is that the only arrears, so-called arrears, now we can call arrears, are those that have gone into the gift mix system because they have been audited, they have been verified. But any other thing that you call claims cannot be arrears unless they go through the verification and auditing and the system, the gift mix system. Yet, you take the budget statement, you look at the fiscal table, and you will see that the minister, under the arrears clearance, has 2 lines under arrears built up. The first line is arrears reported in the gift mix. Then the second line, which he created artificially, he called it unreleased claims. Unreleased claims. That is very alien to the fiscal framework. And that 49.2 billion is what took the fiscals out of gear. So we know what they did. Ladies and gentlemen, even the IMF technical memorandum defines how to derive primary fiscal balance. The IMF technical memorandum that we signed with them, government of Ghana signed with them, states that the program's primary fiscal balance is cumulative from the beginning of the fiscal year. So if you go and bring arrears dating back to 2012 or claims dating back to 2012, 2013, when the IMF's own definition of primary fiscal balance says those accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year. You see the challenge there. That is one of the challenges. Then the definition goes further to say that which is measured as the difference between the primary balance on cash basis from the financing side. That's the difference between revenue and expenditure. And then also net change in the stock of payables or arrears of the central government reported in gift mix. The IMF has stated that clearly, reported in gift mix. So first, the definition says accumulated from the beginning of the fiscal year. You have brought in claims from several years. The definition also says that they should be reported in gift mix. And you have brought data which is not reported in gift mix. And you come and tell us you have done justice to the fiscals? No. This is statistical thievery. Ladies and gentlemen, the government must therefore explain how they came by the methodology used in computing the fiscal balances. I am really lost as to how they drive the fiscal balances without fully applying the methodology agreed with the IMF in the technical memorandum of understanding. What is even more concerning, ladies and gentlemen, is the minister proudly declaring to the world, based on the voodoo computations he has done, that his country has breached the IMF program, when the evidence is to the contrary. And when the IMF itself is yet to conduct a review of program implementation in April 2025. So IMF is yet to do their review. But the minister, whose performance is to be reviewed, has already announced to the world that he has breached. The NPP is no longer in government. The NDC is in government. And so if there is a breach, it is not the NPP that has breached. It is the government of Ghana under President Mahama that has breached. I believe they don't know this. But ladies and gentlemen, is it not even surprising that the finance minister of a country will wish his country drilling an IMF program even before the IMF conducts a review? Yet, the same minister in the same budget projected foreign financing for his budget for the year to include $720 million from the IMF and $600 million from the World Bank. How come the government doesn't know that when Ghana fails a review, IMF review, because of the manipulated data they used, they will not receive the $1.3 billion from the IMF and the World Bank? How come they don't know that? And yet you go and put 1.3 billion in the budget that you will receive from the IMF and the World Bank, and you are declaring that you have breached. And when you breach, the money will not be disbursed. So this already throws your budget off gear. So this budget cannot be a realistic budget. Ladies and gentlemen, electoral official creditors bringing us outright cancellation of almost 4 billion of our debts. Outright cancellation of almost 4 billion of the debts we owe them. And then $7.5 billion of debt service relief. If you put all of them together, you are talking about 12 billion United States dollars that the NPP government negotiated and got this relief for Ghana. But this is also tied to the IMF program. So breaching an IMF program means that you go back to the status quo before the debt restructuring. Are they aware of that? I believe they have been briefed, but they've ignored good advice. Do they even know that when all this happened, Ghana will be brought back to unsustainable debt levels and occasion an economic crisis? How will they fund the programs outlined in the budget then? How about investor credibility? On the 2025 fiscal framework, another baseless revelation in the budget is the projection of a sudden reduction in the commitment primary deficit from 3.9% of GDP in 2024 to a sudden primary surplus of 1.5% of GDP in 2025. I wish it were that simple to adjust by 5.4 percentage points between 1 year. I wish it could be done. But this is not possible. And so again, their projection of the fiscal balances for 2025 make this budget not credible, and requiring serious scrutiny by the IMF and the people of Ghana. We, the mighty minority, would like to call on the IMF to speak to this in the spirit of transparency, which is one of the cardinal values of the fund. This should be done as a matter of urgency before much damage is done to our country's economy. Already, the government has announced it is returning to the bond market, yet they could not even acknowledge the enhanced debt environment created by the previous NPP government for bringing Ghana's debt to GDP ratio at the end of 2024 to 61.8%. 61.8%. You recall, we had to go to the IMF because of debt distress, because of unsustainable debts. Our debt levels had gotten to about 81% of GDP. If today the debt levels have come down from 81% of GDP to 61.8%, that should tell you that this is not by magic. This is as a result of skilled negotiation by the government. It's as a result of the implementation of a very powerful debt strategy that we have had to implement to bring the debt levels to that level. And ladies and gentlemen, let me add that the 61.8% debt to GDP ratio is lower than the pre-COVID-19 debt to GDP ratio of 65.7% in 2019. So if you look at the debt trajectory, you will see before COVID, our debt to GDP ratio was lower. But because we had to borrow so much to finance our COVID interventions, we had to borrow also to do to address the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war. We had to borrow for the financial cleanup exercise as well. The debt levels went to that 80%. And so if we have now brought it to the level better than the 2019 pre-COVID, it tells you that the NPP government has successfully brought Ghana's debt levels to accelerated, sustainable path. The least the NDC can do is to continue to implement our debt strategy. After all, what is the target of the IMF as far as our debt levels are concerned? The IMF projects Ghana to achieve a target of 55% debt to GDP in net present value terms by 2028. 2028. If by the end of 2024, we've already brought it down to 61.8%, then it means that it is left with just 6 percentage points to achieve the IMF target. And so the NDC government should be able to achieve this in the middle of this year, long ahead of 2028. But Gideon will tell you the way they've started borrowing, the rate at which they are borrowing, we are very worried that they may return us to unsustainable debt levels. Ladies and gentlemen, let me add that these debt levels I'm talking about, 61.8%, compares favorably with the NDC's debt to GDP of 73% in 2016 when they left government, until the GDP was rebased in 2018 before the figure changed. But the actual performance in terms of debt sustainability by the time the NDC left office was 73%. So you are saying that NPP has overborrowed, yet we ended our tenure with 61.8%. But you, who didn't borrow, you ended your term with 73%. Ladies and gentlemen, it is surprising, nevertheless, that notwithstanding the improvement in the debt environment, the timing of the announcement of the minister to enter bond markets, and I'm sure you have heard, the minister has announced that he is going into the bond markets. They are going to open up the bond markets. And I'm saying that this is not good advice. And this is my reason. The timing for the announcement of the minister to open the bond market coincided with the announcement of the elevated fiscal deficit based on their manipulated data, a condition that exposes the country to high risk of borrowing from the markets. The effects of this unfortunate data manipulation are already hitting our economy, already, since they read the budget. Why do I say that? The government must know that just by presenting such erroneous data as propaganda to score cheap political points, Ghana's sovereign bond spreads are already widening, again, nearing 700 basis points, when almost 3 months ago, this had declined to 500 basis points and was even heading further downwards. Why do we want to destroy the gains which we have made through cheap politics? Also, Bloomberg reported last Tuesday, 11th March, the very day the budget was presented to Parliament, that Ghana's dollar sovereign bonds were among bottom performers in emerging markets, after the Minister for Finance said the country missed a primary budget balance target of 2024. Just after saying that, this is what the market is saying to us. Dollar bonds due 2035 declined 1.8%. Notes maturing in 2029 fell by 1%. So international markets have not reacted kindly to the budget, demonstrating their lack of confidence in the government's economic policy direction. So you see, if you cook figures to create a narrative to run your country down, international investors will show you where power lies. That is what is happening to Ghana already. Sadly, if you decided to take away the 49.2 billion cedis they put in the fiscal framework, the overall fiscal deficit will be 3.4%, not the 7.6% the minister announced. And the primary balance will be surplus 0.6%, not the deficit 3.1% the minister announced. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, both the overall deficit and the primary balance would have been better than the targets in the 2024 budget, as well as the IMF targets for the next IMF review to be conducted in April this year. Sorry to say, the government didn't want this good narrative because that would have signified the prudent performance of the economy under the NPP. But they didn't want that, and therefore Ghana should suffer. I am wondering how well the international markets would have responded to the budget if an accurate picture was put out. Ghana is the loser. I'm sorry about this. Ghana is the loser. A big opportunity missed because of unhealthy politics. The reaction of the international markets will even be worse than what I am reading to you. In the event that the IMF review fails because of this manipulated data used by the government, the international market will even react violently towards Ghana. But in good conscience, we believe that the IMF will be fair to the Ghanaian people by holding on to the agreed method of computing the fiscal data during the review, as they did in all the previous reviews. Other than this, the Ghanaian people stand to suffer, and not the politicians, from these obviously bad political decisions. The Ghanaian people can recall that in the past, Ghana was fined $39 million for misreporting economic data to the IMF due to wrong data submitted by the NDC government led by President Rawlings, the former President Rawlings. It appears we are on our way there under another NDC government, under President Mahama. We wish to advise the Minister for Finance to tread cautiously in order not to drill our march to sustainable debt levels. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the manipulation of the fiscal data notwithstanding, the strong health of the economy the NPP handed to the new NDC government continues to be vindicated by other economic indicators. So even as they have manipulated the fiscals, there are other indicators that are evident of the work we did in our performance during the period of Akufo-Addo Bawumia government. The debt to GDP ratio of 61.8%, as I mentioned earlier, achieved in 2024, was not by accident. It was due to skilled negotiation and the implementation of a good debt strategy. The Honorable Minister, if you watch him during the presentation of the budget, could not even acknowledge this important development by the imminent absence of this ratio in his budget speech. He couldn't even mention that amount of the debt levels in his budget speech. But we know that this is historic, and history will be kind to Akufo-Addo Bawumia government. Another good news for Ghana was the announcement by the Ghana Statistical Service of a real GDP growth rate of 5.7% for the 2024 fiscal year. This is the highest in 5 years, the highest growth in 5 years since 2020. But the recovery from the global crisis had begun in 2023 when GDP growth surpassed 1.5% target to end the year at 3.1%. That was when the recovery began. The 5.7% growth in 2024 was more than the budget target of 3.1% and the revised budget target of 4%. The growth was led by industry for the first time in many years. For many years, the services sector led our growth. In 2024, for the first time in many years, industry led our growth with a growth of 7.1%, followed by services at 5.9% and agriculture at 2.8%. This means that the Ghanaian economy has entered the phase of structural transformation, another historic development. This is what economists call structural transformation. You have the services sector leading, and then you have the industry overtaking. There has been structural transformation of the economy, and this occurred again under the NPP government. Again, surprising to me, the minister tried to downplay this major achievement by attributing this growth to mining, which grew at 9.4%. He actually called it galamsey, which grew at 9.4%. However, what he doesn't know is that the same data from which he took the growth of the mining sector points out that the construction subsector grew by 9.6%, more than the growth in mining. So why couldn't he say that industry growth was led by construction sector? Yes, that's statistical service data. And yesterday the statistical service said it. Why couldn't he say that? And manufacturing, after many years, grew by 3.9%. Manufacturing. It used to grow negative, 3.9% this time. In the services sector, we saw a notable growth of 15.8% in information and communications, largely due to the digitalization agenda implemented by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Certainly, our economic growth story shows that growth was not a jobless growth. And that was why up to 2.3 million Ghanaians got employed under the NPP government. Unfortunately for the NDC, their growth strategy produced lower growth throughout President Mohammed's first term as president, and in particular, producing 4% growth in 2015 and 3.4%, a paltry growth, 3.4% in 2016. Curiously, ladies and gentlemen, with all the promises the NDC is talking about, programs they are talking about in the 2025 budget, curiously, this government is projecting to grow at just 4.4% in 2025. How could a reset economy slow growth following just a strong growth of 5.7% the year before? How could a reset economy project to grow at 4.4% when the economy the president described as criminally mismanaged grew at 5.7%? It must also be noted that despite the hype about the 24-hour economy, the initiative the NDC talks so much about, the initiative does not promise to deliver accelerated growth in the economy because industry performance is not promising. Industry performance, as projected by they themselves, is not promising. The budget estimates that projected growth rates for industry averages 5% between 2025 and 2027. It's in the budget. 5% that industry will grow between 2025 and 2027. And if the 24-hour economy is actually going to work, we expect growth from industry in particular to be higher than this. And so if you compare this with the industry growth of 7.1% in 2024, then you wonder what will be the benefit of the 24-hour economy if industry does not reach the heights of the previous NPP government. We also know, and we have heard since the budget was presented, that there is no program in the budget on the 24-hour economy initiative. In fact, the minister himself said they will launch it soon. If it is not in the 2025 economic policy and budget statement, then it is not for 2025. It means no money is to be voted for it. So Ghanaians will have to wait at least until 2026 if we are lucky to have any hope of seeing how this campaign slogan translates into jobs. NDC, as you know, campaign on 24-hour economy, and yet they are in no hurry to deliver on it. NPP campaigned in 2016 on free senior high school, and it was delivered in Akufo-Addo's first budget of 2017.
Yeah.
Still on our record performance, not only were the trade balances brought from deficits under President Mohammed's first term to surpluses under Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, but our capacity to withstand shocks and other external vulnerabilities improved significantly, with a record gross international reserves of $8.9 billion, the equivalent of 4 months of import cover. This compares better against the research economy's projected gross international reserves of 3 months of import cover. So the 8.9 billion we have given them, what are they going to do with it such that this year, 2025, one day should be increasing it to 11 billion? They are talking about 3 months of import cover. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the technical bit. That gives you the background of where we are coming from. The economy that has been described as bad and figures manipulated to create that narrative. You have heard from me our record, and this data is public data. But we are yet to even hear more about the 2025 budget itself. And to start with this, I have the pleasure to invite my colleague, the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, the Honorable Abna Osei Asari.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Amin Adam. And thank you very much for the opportunity as well. I will go into the fiscal sector. The fiscal sector will look at the revenues as well as the expenditure
2025.
for 2025.
Oh, yeah. Perhaps you should change position.
The change of revenues that they voted in the budget. Let me begin by saying that it is interesting that the minister, in highlighting his fiscal policy strategy for 2025, uses phrases such as, "It is crucial that we establish macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability." A few months ago, the IMF concluded its third program. Let me quote just a section of the staff reports. Ghana's policy and reform efforts under the IMF-supported program have continued to deliver encouraging results. Following acute economical and financial pressures in 2022, the fund-supported project has provided a credible anchor for the government to adjust macroeconomic policies and launch comprehensive reforms to restore macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability, while laying the foundation for higher and more inclusive growth. These efforts are paying off, with the growth recovering rapidly, inflation declining, although at a slow pace, and the fiscal and external positions further improving. End of the quotes. So clearly, we have laid a solid foundation for this government to operate. And so it is very disingenuous for them to create an impression as though we have bequeathed an economy full of problems. Let's come to the revenue numbers they showed in the 2025 budget. In 2025, the real growth of total revenue and grants, as we see in pages 132 of the budget and pages 134 of the budget, is just 0.2 percentage points. We left it at 15.9%. That is tax to GDP. We left it at 15.9%. And an economy that claims to be resetting is saying that I am only growing revenue by 0.2%. That is 16.1% of GDP. At the end of 2024, our revenue numbers were 186 billion Ghana cedis, and they want to grow it to 224 billion Ghana cedis in 2025. Like I said, the growth in real terms is not encouraging. But when you look, if you listen to the minister on Tuesday, in paragraph 173, the minister stated in the budget statement that they are projecting a tax revenue percentage of 17.2%. So clearly, two different figures are being shown here. But like I always say to people, the real details are in the budget. The real details are in the appendices of the budget. Minister in his speech says, I'm growing revenue by 17.2% of tax to GDP ratio. And then you come into the budget and it's 16.1%. Clearly, there's a problem with the credibility of our budgets. Let me come to the expenditures as well. The former minister made mention of the 24-hour economy, and so I will skip that. But let me say that when you compare our expenditures in 2024, when we had an election, usually with elections, the government spends so much because they have to give the Electoral Commission everything that they will need to conduct a free and fair election. So when you look at the appropriation for 2024, clearly with an election that was fully funded by government alone, the appropriation was 250 billion Ghana cedis. Here we are, NDC telling us that they want to cut waste, reduce, rationalize expenditure, and reduce the waste in the system. They are giving us an expenditure and appropriation of 291 billion Ghana cedis. 291 billion Ghana cedis. No election. We are cutting down. So they say one thing, and the numbers in the budget speaks to something completely different. That also boils down to the credibility of the budget. Let me come to the uncapping that the minister spoke about. The expenditure measures of uncapping transfers to some statutory funds to enable them to fund other government programs is no-brainer. We have done it before. And so it's just continuing with what we also did. Every government has its discretion on how to fund its programs. While we cap the transfer to the statutory funds and use the cap transfers funds to fund free SHS and other programs, this NDC government has decided to uncap transfers to Get Fund so that Get Fund will fund free SHS. We have done it before. It is nothing new. We uncap and cap, and it's at the discretion of the minister. Where you find that you need to restore the capping, you restore it. And we did that in 2017 when we realized that NHIS was saddled with a debt of about 2 billion Ghana cedis in claims. In 2016, that was what the NDC left for us, and we made sure we provided enough funds by restoring the cap funds in NHIA to enable them pay this. So we have done it before. It is nothing new. And so we were thinking that with the resetting, something innovative was going to come up, but nothing new came up. We have done it before, and it is normal. Also, by virtue of the debt restructuring, let me say that the government absorbed the get fund debt. And so once we absorb the get fund debt, there's more room for get fund to take on other equally important things. When you also look in the budgets that they provided for us, you realize that all funding coming from the oil revenues, that's the annual budget funding amount, the ABFA, every little fund coming from that has been put into the big push, 13.8 billion, which includes our mineral royalties and the oil revenue as well. And you ask yourself, you dedicate 13.8 billion Ghana cedis into this fund. But when you look in the budget, this is supposed to be their documents for policy and directions. You don't see so much about the big push. But here we are, they voting 13.8 billion Ghana cedis to an initiative called the Big Push without any skin or flesh for Ghanaians to see what exactly they want to do. Per the Earmark Funds Capping and Alignment Act, it is okay for the minister, like I said, to exercise discretion with statutory funds. And so we await to see what the minister will do once they bring the amendment to Parliament for us to look at it. The minister also said a lot about social spending. As part of the IMF agreement, we were supposed to spend a certain amount of our revenues on social spending. These four social spending initiatives: capitation grants, NHIS, and LEAP, and school feeding. So when the minister mentioned that there's a strategy, and so they are going to increase that of school feeding, they are also going to increase the numbers for LEAP. It is something that is already drawn out in the IMF program, and as and when you get there, you implement it. So that is also nothing new. So in resetting the economy, clearly nothing new has been given to us. Let me also state that for me, I was thinking that, and we were thinking that if clearly the minister wanted to rationalize expenditure, he would have created that enabling environment for the private sector to take up that heavy lifting. That was what we were thinking, that clearly if you want to cut expenditure, give that heavy lifting to the private sector. Come up with initiatives that will support the private sector to take up the employment, grow the industries, and take that burden off government. But we did not see that. The measures outlined to enable the private sector growth, such as the support for women entrepreneurs, agriculture for economic transformation agenda, the rapid industrialization for jobs initiative, among others, are all centered heavily on the government. And these things, once it's on government, it's temporary, it's not permanent. And so you cannot grow the economy as you ought to grow if you had given that space to the private sector. So I believe that the budget failed to provide the mechanics of the policy, making all these fiscal, huge fiscal implications that I have mentioned credible. And so they will have to come back again to tell us how they are going to one fund this and also help the private sector. You see, the Ghana Cares program, the NEIP program, and the Youth Start were initiatives helping the private sector to grow. Now, funding has been removed from all these initiatives. The Youth Start, the Ghana Cares were addressing the issues of the SMEs. And we know the important role SMEs play in this country. They, give us about 70 to 80% of employment. And then they also sustain and hold the economy. And you heard the minister mention that our growth of 5.7 in 2024 was being led by industry. And so if you take out these small supports that government was giving to them, then clearly we are in for some disappointments in that area as well. And so what I want to say about this budget is that it looks ambitious. But when you look at the numbers doesn't tell that story. Before I end, I also want to put on record that we have seen some new development in the expenditure numbers. That's a bit shocking to those of us on this side. Look at the compensation amount and the Office of Government Machinery. During the NPP era, Office of Government Machinery had a budget for compensation of 326 million Ghana cedis, and that included the development authorities, included national, the scholarship secretariat, and a couple of other agencies, Maslock, SIGA, and the others. But here we are in 2025. When you look at the expenditure numbers, the compensation under OGM is 2.7 billion Ghana cedis. From 326 of a perceived overblown government to a lean government of 2.7 billion Ghana cedis, where they have also taken away some of these agencies. Now, SIGA is no more under Office of Government Machinery, it's under Ministry of Finance. Internal Audit Agency is no more under OGM, it's under Ministry of Finance. Scholarship Secretariat is no more under OGM, it's under Ministry of Youth and Development. There are quite a number of these agencies that were under OGM in 2024 that have been scrapped, the development authorities. Yet still, you see a budget of 2.7 billion Ghana cedis for compensation alone. They will say that they have added Ministry of National Security. National Security in 2014, compensations budget was 1.28 billion. So assuming you add 10%, give or take, and then let's say it goes to 1.4 billion Ghana cedis for national security, and you add the 326 that existed in 2024, it comes to about 1.7 billion Ghana cedis. So there's a clear difference of 1 billion Ghana cedis added to a lean government compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, we need answers. That is why I say that the budget lacks credibility, and so they should come again. On this note, I would like to invite my brother, Dr. Gideon Kwako, to take over from me. Thank you very much.